From Failure to Success. My English Journey, Segment 1. The moment everything fell apart, I never planned to tell this story. Not because it isn't important, but because for a long time I was ashamed of it. Ashamed of the failures, ashamed of the mistakes, ashamed of how many opportunities I watched disappear simply because I couldn't speak English. People think failure happens suddenly, but my failure grew slowly, silently, like a shadow behind me. It followed me to school, to job interviews, to conversations where I pretended to understand, but didn't. I still remember the day everything collapsed. I was sitting in a small office across from a manager who barely looked at me. He scanned my CV, paused, and said the words I had heard too many times. Good profile, but your English is not strong enough. It felt like someone pressed pause on my life. The room faded, my heartbeat became loud, so loud it drowned out his voice. I forced a smile, nodded, and stood up slowly. When I stepped outside the building, the sky looked the same. People were walking, cars were moving, but inside me something had broken. It wasn't just the rejection. It wasn't even the lost opportunity. It was the realization that I had become a prisoner of a language I didn't know how to speak. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly defeated. I walked home that day in silence, not because I wanted silence, but because my thoughts were too loud. Every step felt heavy, like I was carrying a backpack full of disappointments. I kept replaying the interview, imagining different versions of myself, a confident version, a fluent version, a version who didn't freeze when a question came. But those versions lived only in my imagination. At home, I sat on my bed and stared at the wall. I thought about the things I wanted in life: a good job, respect, opportunities, a future I wasn't afraid of. And I realized something painful. None of these dreams would come true if I didn't change. Not the world, not my situation, me. I looked at my reflection in the mirror and said a sentence I had never said out loud before. You failed because you were not prepared. It wasn't an insult, it was the truth. And sometimes the truth is the first step to transformation. But I didn't know where to begin. My English was broken. My confidence was worse. And my belief in myself was almost gone. Most people quit at this stage. Most people look at failure and turn away. But something inside me refused to give up. A small voice, quiet but stubborn, whispering, "This is not the end, this is the beginning." That night, instead of sleeping, I opened the internet and searched. How to learn English fast? Of course, thousands of techniques appeared. Some promised magic in 30 days. Some promised fluency without studying. Some looked like scams. But I wasn't searching for shortcuts. I was searching for a method, a path, a way forward, and then something unexpected happened. I clicked on a simple video, just like the one you're listening to right now. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't flashy, but as the narrator spoke slowly, clearly, emotionally, something clicked in my brain. For the first time, English felt understandable. For the first time, I felt hope. I watched another video, then another. I didn't realize it, but I had just taken my first step. A small step, yes. But sometimes the smallest steps lead to the biggest destinations. The next morning, I made a decision that changed everything. I will learn English every single day, no matter how I feel. No excuses, no breaks, no tomorrow. That was the moment my journey truly began. But journeys are never smooth at the beginning. I struggled with the simplest sentences. My pronunciation was shaky. I forgot words 5 seconds after learning them. Sometimes I felt stupid. Sometimes I felt slow. Sometimes I felt like quitting. But I didn't, because every time I felt weak, I remembered the office, the rejection, the look on the manager's face, and I promised myself I will never feel that powerless again. I started shadowing videos every morning, repeating sentences out loud. I recorded my voice even though I hated hearing it. I read children's books because they were the only ones I understood. I watched English movies with subtitles. And slowly, painfully slowly, something changed. One day I realized I understood a full English sentence without translating it in my head. It was a small victory, but it felt like winning a war. Small progress became big motivation, and big motivation created consistency. As the weeks passed, English stopped feeling like a mountain. It became a path, challenging, yes, but walkable, and with every step, I felt myself becoming stronger, more confident, more alive. I didn't know it then, but my failures were shaping me into someone new, someone I had always wanted to be. And this is where the real transformation begins. Because failure didn't destroy me, it woke me up. Segment 2. The day I decided to change everything. The morning after I made my promise, something felt different in the air. It wasn't confidence, it wasn't excitement, it was something quieter, a kind of seriousness, a realization that my life would not improve unless I improved first. I woke up earlier than usual, sat by the window, and opened my notebook. I wrote only one sentence. If you want a new life, start with a new habit. That was the rule I would live by from that day forward. I began with something simple, repeating phrases out loud. At first it felt embarrassing. The words in my mouth felt heavy, unfamiliar, awkward. But I kept going. I read sentences slowly. I listened to how native speakers spoke them. I paused, then I repeated them again and again and again. It wasn't fun, it wasn't beautiful, but it was progress, and at that time, progress was the only thing I needed. Every day I tried to push myself just a little more. If I studied 20 minutes yesterday, I studied 25 today. If I learned 5 new words yesterday, I learned 7 today. I wasn't racing anyone. I wasn't competing. I was simply trying to defeat the weaker version of myself, the version who gave up too easily, the version who waited for life to change on its own. During those first few weeks, the biggest challenge wasn't grammar or vocabulary. It wasn't pronunciation. It wasn't listening. The biggest challenge was discipline. My mind often whispered, "You're tired, skip today. You're busy, study later. It's just one day, because it doesn't matter." But it did matter. It mattered more than anything. I learned something important. English is not learned in one big moment. It is learned in thousands of small moments, moments where you choose growth over comfort. Slowly, my discipline turned into routine, and my routine turned into identity. I no longer said, I'm learning English. I said, I'm an English learner. There's a big difference between the two. When you learn, it sounds like something you do sometimes. When you are a learner, it becomes part of who you are. Every night before sleeping, I ask myself one question. Did I grow today? If the answer was yes, I slept peacefully. If the answer was no, I promised to make the next day better. And then something interesting happened. After 2 weeks of practice, I began noticing small changes. When I watched English videos, my brain didn't panic. When I heard unfamiliar words, I didn't freeze. I tried to guess the meaning. When I read sentences, the structure didn't look impossible anymore. I could feel my mind slowly adjusting, adapting, opening. But the real turning point happened one evening. I was practicing shadowing, repeating after a speaker in real time. At the beginning, I could only copy 1 or 2 words before losing the rhythm. But on that particular evening, I repeated an entire sentence without stopping. It wasn't perfect. My accent was not smooth, but I did it. For the first time, English felt like something I could hold, something I could control, something I could own. I put my hands on my face and actually laughed. It wasn't a big achievement in the world's eyes, but in my heart it felt massive. That moment became fuel. It proved that improvement was happening, even if slowly. And improvement, even slow improvement, is hope. Day by day, English became less of a stranger and more of a friend. I talked to myself in English while washing dishes. I thought in English while walking to the store. I described my feelings in English before sleeping. Even my dreams started mixing languages. My mind, without knowing it, was creating an English world inside itself. The people around me noticed the difference. Some supported me, some doubted me, some made jokes. But I wasn't doing this for applause. I wasn't doing this for likes or compliments. I was doing it for the version of myself I wanted to become. Still, the journey wasn't smooth. There were days when I felt stuck, days when English felt impossible again, days when my progress felt invisible. On those days, my old self returned. The self filled with self-doubt, fear, and frustration. I wanted to quit many times, especially when pronunciation embarrassed me or when I forgot words I had studied just hours ago. But whenever I felt weak, I reminded myself, you are not doing this to avoid failure. You are doing this so you can succeed. I realized something essential. You do not become fluent by avoiding mistakes. You become fluent by walking through them. You speak badly until you speak well. You forget words until you remember them. You feel nervous until you become confident. There is no magic. There is only consistency. Near the end of the first month, something extraordinary happened. I was watching an English interview when I suddenly understood a joke. Instantly, without subtitles, without translation. And I laughed. Not because the joke was hilarious, but because I understood it without effort. That feeling, the feeling of understanding another language directly, felt like a superpower awakening inside me. After that night, I realized something powerful. My fear of English had turned into curiosity. My confusion had turned into clarity. My insecurity had turned into growth. And all of it happened from simple daily practice. practice that didn't feel like a big transformation but became one. By this time, English was no longer just a subject for me. It was a tool, a weapon, a bridge to a version of myself I hadn't met yet. But even then, I didn't know that the biggest test, the moment that would change everything, was coming soon. Because learning English at home is one thing, using English in the real world is something completely different, and I was about to face that challenge. Ready or not? Segment 3, the first real test. The day of my first real English test didn't come with a warning. It didn't arrive politely, giving me time to prepare. It came suddenly, like life often does, without asking whether I was ready. It started on an ordinary morning, the kind where you don't expect anything meaningful to happen. I was drinking tea, scrolling quietly through job listings, when I saw something that made my heart stop. A company I admired, one I had dreamed of working for, posted a junior position. The requirements were simple: basic skills, willingness to learn, and communicate in English during the interview. My throat tightened. I stared at the screen for a full minute. My heart began racing, but not out of fear alone. There was excitement. Too, a feeling I hadn't tasted in a long time. A little voice inside whispered, "This could be your chance." But another voice, louder and colder, replied immediately, "You're not ready yet. You'll embarrass yourself. You'll fail again." For a moment, I didn't know which voice to believe. I closed the laptop and walked slowly around the room. Memories of past failures returned: the silent rooms, the confused faces, the rejections, the disappointment. I could feel the old fear crawling back into me. But there was something else inside me too. Something new I had been building for weeks. Discipline, practice, belief. I took a deep breath and reopened the laptop. My finger hovered above the apply button. My mind screamed, "Wait!" But my heart whispered, "Go." And for once I listened to my heart. I applied. The very moment I clicked the button, I felt a rush of energy, fear, excitement, hope, all mixed into one. And beneath it all was a quiet realization. I had just stepped into the next level of my journey. For the next 2 days, I could barely focus on anything else. I practiced my introduction, repeated sentences, rehearsed answers, watched English interview videos. I even spoke to myself in the mirror, pretending to be confident, pretending to be fluent, pretending to be someone I wasn't yet, but desperately wanted to become. I knew my English wasn't perfect. I knew my accent wasn't smooth. I knew my vocabulary was limited, but I also knew something more important. I wasn't the same person who had failed that last interview. I spent hours practicing some of the simplest things, like saying my name clearly, describing my strengths without freezing, explaining why I wanted the job. I recorded my voice, listened back, corrected myself. Some moments were encouraging, others were humiliating, but every moment helped me grow. The night before the interview, I sat quietly with my notebook. I didn't study grammar. I didn't memorize new vocabulary. I wrote a single sentence: "Tomorrow I will do the best I can with the English I have today." I wasn't aiming for perfection anymore. I was aiming for effort, for courage, for progress. That mindset changed everything. The next morning, I dressed carefully, sat at my desk, and waited for the interview call. My hands were shaking, my heart was beating so fast I could feel it in my throat. When the screen lit up and the interviewer appeared, time seemed to slow down. He smiled. "Good morning, can you hear me?" I swallowed hard. My voice trembled as I said, "Yes, yes, I can hear you." My accent was thick, my sentence was simple, but it was the bravest thing I had said in years. The interview started. The first few minutes were painful. My voice cracked. I paused too long. I repeated some words. At one point, I completely forgot how to finish a sentence and had to start over. But something incredible happened too. Every time I made a mistake, I didn't freeze. Every time I lost a word, I didn't panic. Every time I felt scared, I breathed and continued. The interviewer was patient, kind, and surprisingly encouraging. When I described my learning routine, he nodded with genuine interest. When I spoke about my motivation, he smiled. When I admitted that English was still difficult for me, he said something I never expected. "You're doing well. Keep going." Those words landed in my heart like a gift. By the middle of the interview, something inside me shifted. My fear softened. My sentences flowed more naturally. My pronunciation relaxed. My confidence rose. It wasn't perfect English, but it was real English, my English, earned through effort, built through pain, carried by heart. When the interview ended, the manager said, "Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for your effort. We'll contact you soon." I closed the laptop and sat back slowly. My whole body trembled. But this time it wasn't from fear. It was from pride. Not because I was fluent, not because I was perfect, but because I had faced the moment I feared the most, and I didn't run. For the first time in my life, I felt like success wasn't something far away. It wasn't something only other people could have. It was something I could touch if I kept going. Later that day, something beautiful happened. I was walking outside when I overheard two tourists speaking English. Before, I would avoid listening. This time I listened, not to understand every word, but to feel the rhythm. And suddenly, naturally, effortlessly, God, I understood most of the conversation, and I smiled, not because I was fluent, but because I could feel the progress inside me. A few days later, an email arrived. With trembling hands, I opened it. They didn't give me the job. My heart fell for a moment, but only for a moment, because the email also said this: "We were impressed by your effort. Keep improving your English and apply again. You are on the right path." Something inside me lit up, yet I had failed again. But this time it wasn't the painful failure of the past. This time it was meaningful. This time it made me stronger. This time it pushed me forward, and I realized something powerful. Failure is not a wall, it's a teacher. That rejection did not break me, it built me, because I didn't fail the way I used to. This time I failed better. This time I failed forward. This time my failure was actually success in disguise, the kind of success that prepares you for the bigger victories ahead. And I knew deep inside that the journey ahead would transform me, not just in English, but in life. Because a person who doesn't give up cannot be stopped. Segment 4. The breakthrough. I never saw coming. After that second rejection, something unexpected happened inside me. I didn't collapse. I didn't fall apart. I didn't feel like a failure. Instead, I felt something I had never felt before: resilience. The small voice inside me, the one that once whispered fear, had grown louder, stronger, almost unshakable. It kept repeating a simple sentence: "You're closer than you think." For the first time in my life, I believed it. The old version of me would have stopped there. One rejection was enough to break me before. Two rejections felt like the universe was telling me to give up. But now it felt different. It didn't feel like a dead end. It felt like a checkpoint. Proof that I was on the right path, even if the journey was still long. I looked at myself in the mirror that night. I didn't see a loser. I didn't see someone who was bad at English. I didn't see someone running from opportunities. I saw something else, something I had never seen before. Transformation. Not fluent English, not perfect sentences, but growth, strength, progress. And when you finally see progress, even small progress, something powerful happens. You become dangerous to your old self. Your doubts lose their power. Your fears lose their influence. Your excuses lose their voice. I went to bed with a smile that night, not because I had a job, but because I had hope. Real hope. The next morning, everything changed. I woke up earlier than usual, not out of obligation, but out of excitement. English didn't feel like a burden anymore. It felt like a tool, a key, a bridge, a doorway. I grabbed my notebook, opened a fresh page, and wrote, "What if I become better than I ever imagined?" That sentence became my new fuel. I began studying with intensity, not desperation, not panic, not pressure, but passion. For the first time, English wasn't something I had to learn. It was something I wanted to master. I started watching English documentaries with full focus. I listened to English podcasts during breakfast. I shadowed speakers with more emotion, more energy, more confidence. I practiced conversations with myself in the mirror. I wrote daily journals in English, describing my thoughts, my fears, my goals, and then something remarkable started happening. I didn't notice it immediately. Progress rarely announces itself loudly. It appears slowly, quietly, gently. One evening, I was reading an English article online. Normally, I would stop every few sentences, confused, frustrated, stuck. But this time, something was different. I read paragraph after paragraph without stopping. My eyes moved with ease. My mind didn't struggle. My brain didn't translate. When I finished the article, I sat back in surprise. For the first time in my life, I had understood a full English text without breaking it into pieces. It felt magical, almost unbelievable. I read it again just to make sure. And yes, I understood it again. A warm electric feeling spread through my chest. I whispered to myself, "You're doing it. You're really doing it." That small breakthrough changed everything. From that day, learning English began to feel natural. The language didn't scare me anymore. When I didn't understand something, I didn't panic. I stayed calm. I guessed. I tried again. I repeated. I moved forward. My confidence grew with every small victory. I started thinking in English more often. I started forming sentences without effort. I started remembering words I once forgot easily. I started speaking with a rhythm I never had before. I started feeling like English was not outside me, it was inside me. But the biggest breakthrough came in the most unexpected moment. I was at a cafe sitting alone, practicing sentences quietly while waiting for my order. Two foreign tourists were sitting nearby speaking English. Normally I would avoid listening, but this time I let myself tune in gently, not to judge myself, not to prove anything, but just to listen. And then something surprising happened. I understood almost everything they said. Not perfectly, not word for word, but naturally, as if my brain was doing the work on its own. At one point, one of them looked around confused. Their phone battery had died, and they needed directions. I felt my heart pound in my chest. A voice inside me whispered, "Help them, say something." My hands shook slightly, my legs felt heavy, but I stood up anyway. "Do you need help?" I asked. The words came out softly, not flawless, not confident, but real. The tourist turned to me with relief in his eyes. "Yes. Can you tell us how to get to the museum?" My mind froze for a second. The old fear returned, but only for a moment. I took a slow breath and forced my voice to come out. "It's 2 streets straight, then left near the big park." He smiled warmly. "Thank you so much. Your English is great." My heart burst with disbelief. "My English is great?" Someone had said those words to me genuinely, kindly, respectfully. The moment felt surreal. As they walked away, I sat back down with trembling hands. Tears filled my eyes, not because it was emotional, but because it was proof. All my effort, all my struggle, all my failures, they were paying off. That evening, I wrote something new in my notebook. "One day I will speak English without fear." For the first time, that sentence didn't feel like a dream. It felt like a promise. Over the next weeks, I continued practicing with even more focus. I embraced every mistake as a lesson. I treated every confusion as a puzzle. I celebrated every small win. English slowly transformed from a challenge into a companion, a language that walked with me, taught me, and shaped me. And then, just when I began feeling comfortable, life offered me another test, a bigger one, a scarier one, a test that would decide whether I had truly changed or whether I was just pretending. Because soon, too soon, I received an email that made my heart stop again. A new company, a bigger company, invited me for an English interview. This time I didn't panic. This time I didn't doubt myself. This time I closed my eyes, took a breath, and whispered, "Let's see how far you've come." My journey wasn't over. It was about to reach the moment I had been waiting for. Segment 5. The interview that changed everything. The email arrived early in the morning, right when the sun was rising, painting my room with soft golden light. I opened my phone lazily, planning to check messages and notifications, nothing special. But when I saw the subject line, "Interview Invitation," my entire body froze. For a moment I thought it was a mistake. I refreshed the page. It was still there. A real company, a real position, a real interview, and most importantly, An interview conducted entirely in English. My heart thumped like a heavy drum in my chest. I sat up straight, suddenly awake. I clicked the email and read every line slowly, carefully, almost in disbelief. They wanted to meet me. They wanted to talk to me, not someday soon, tomorrow, tomorrow. The word echoed in my mind like thunder. For weeks I had been preparing unconsciously for moments like these, for opportunities like these, but the moment it arrived, I felt both ready and terrified. A strange combination of excitement and fear rushed through me. I stood up from my bed and paced around the room, breathing deeply, trying to calm my racing thoughts. My old self whispered, "What if you fail again?" But my new self, the one shaped by countless hours of practice, determination, discipline, whispered back, "This time you are not the same person." For the rest of that day, I prepared with a level of focus I had never experienced before. Not pushing myself too hard, not trying to memorize everything, but sharpening the tools I had been building over months. I practiced my introduction, but this time it sounded different. I wasn't repeating memorized lines. I was expressing myself. I practiced answering common interview questions, but this time I wasn't panicking when I forgot a word. I found new words. I improvised. I practiced listening exercises. Slow, fast, American accent, British accent, absorbing every rhythm and pattern. Words didn't feel like enemies anymore. They felt like familiar shapes in my mind. But the most important preparation happened in silence. I sat down in my room, closed my eyes, and imagined myself in the interview, speaking confidently, smiling, holding eye contact, breathing steadily. Not perfect English, but real English, my English. For once, imagination didn't feel like fantasy. It felt like rehearsal. As the day ended, I placed my notebook on the table. Inside it, I wrote a sentence that felt like a final promise to myself. Tomorrow, I will show them who I really am. That night, I slept lightly. Not out of fear, but out of anticipation. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, ready to jump into a new life. Morning came fast. I got ready slowly, choosing my clothes carefully, but not obsessively. I wanted to look like someone who respected the opportunity, but also someone who respected themselves. When the time came, I sat at my desk, adjusted my camera, checked my microphone, and waited for the call. My hands trembled slightly. My heart raced. But I wasn't trying to escape the feeling. I accepted it. Confidence isn't the absence of fear. Confidence is walking forward despite it. Then the screen lit up. A face appeared. The interviewer smiled kindly, a warm, professional smile that eased my nerves instantly. "Good morning," he said. My voice almost cracked, but I managed to say, "Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity." The interview began. The first question was simple. "Tell me about yourself." A question many people underestimate. But I had practiced. My voice shook in the beginning, but soon it stabilized. I talked about my background, my struggles, my motivation to learn English. The interviewer listened closely, nodding at the right moments, signaling that he understood and that he cared. The second question was harder. "Why do you want this job?" This time I didn't use memorized lines. I spoke honestly. I talked about growth, responsibility, the desire to be part of something meaningful. My grammar wasn't perfect, but my sincerity was. The third question surprised me. How did you improve your English? I smiled without meaning to. That question felt personal, emotional. I told him about the countless hours of practice, the failures, the self doubt, the breakthrough moments, the painful mistakes, the small victories. He smiled gently. Your journey is inspiring, he said. Your effort shows. Those words hit me deeply. Halfway through the interview, something changed. The fear began melting, the tension loosened, my sentences flowed more naturally, my pauses became intentional, not nervous. I had stepped into a new version of myself, one I had been building in silence, one practice session at a time. I realized something incredible. This wasn't just an interview, this was proof that I had climbed far from where I started. The interviewer then gave me a task, a short English scenario to explain my ideas. Normally, this would terrify me, but I took a breath and spoke slowly, carefully, clearly. I didn't try to impress, I tried to communicate. When I finished, he said, "That was well explained." My heartbeat softened. For a moment, I felt light. As the interview ended, he smiled again and said, "We will get back to you soon. Thank you for your time." I closed my laptop. Silence filled the room. I put my head in my hands and felt tears push against my eyes. Not tears of fear, not tears of failure, tears of pride. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had shown the world my real potential, not hidden behind fear, not trapped behind broken English, not limited by old mistakes. I stood up, walked to the mirror, and whispered to myself, "You did it. No matter what happens next, you did it." For the rest of the day, I felt unusually calm, peaceful, strong. I didn't check my email every 2 minutes. I didn't replay the interview in my head. I knew I had done the best I could with the English I had today, and that was enough. 2 days later, while I was eating lunch, my phone vibrated. A new email. My heart skipped a beat. I opened it slowly, holding my breath, and then I read the words that would change everything. "Congratulations, you have been selected." My fork dropped from my hand. I covered my mouth, eyes wide, breath stolen from my chest. I read it again and again and again. It didn't feel real at first, but as the truth settled in, a wave of emotion washed over me. All the pain, all the failures, all the mistakes, all the long nights of practice, all the rejections, they weren't punishments, they were preparation. And now finally I had reached the beginning of the success I had been chasing for years. But I didn't celebrate loudly. No shouting, no dancing, no posting anywhere. I simply closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up." This wasn't the end of my journey. It was the moment my journey truly began. Segment 6. A new world, a new English, a new me. The first day of my new job was nothing like I imagined. I thought I would walk in confidently, smiling like a champion, ready to conquer the world. But the truth is, the night before, I barely slept. My mind kept replaying different scenarios. What if I didn't understand my coworkers? What if they spoke too fast? What if my English fell apart the moment I needed it the most? Even after being selected, even after proving myself in the interview, fear still found a way to sneak into my mind. It reminded me of who I used to be, the person who avoided English, who hid behind silence, who feared every conversation. But the next morning, when I stood in front of the mirror wearing my first formal shirt for the job, I reminded myself gently, "You're not that person anymore." The walk to the office felt unreal. Every step reminded me of the long road I took to get here. The failures, the rejections, the nights of practice, the small victories. I wasn't just walking to a job, I was walking into a new chapter of my life. When I entered the building, the receptionist greeted me warmly. "Good morning, you must be the new employee." I froze for half a second, not because I didn't understand, but because I did. I replied slowly, "Yes, good morning, I'm here for my first day." She smiled, handed me an access card, and said, "Welcome. You're going to love it here." As I walked toward the elevator, something inside me lifted. For the first time, English didn't feel like a monster I was fighting. It felt like a bridge I was finally crossing. Inside the elevator, I took a deep breath. My heart was pounding, not from fear but from pride. The doors opened, and I stepped into a world of fast conversations, ringing phones, clicking keyboards, and people speaking English everywhere. For a moment, my old fear tried to pull me back. The voices felt too quick, too fluent, too advanced. But I took one slow breath and whispered inside my mind, "You belong here." During the morning meeting, I sat quietly, listening, absorbing every word. The manager spoke quickly, but his tone was clear and structured. At first, I only understood half of what was being discussed. Then, little by little, sentence by sentence, the meaning became clearer. It wasn't perfect understanding, but it was real understanding. When the meeting ended, my teammate walked over and said, "You understood everything, right?" A wave of panic hit me. I didn't want to look weak. I didn't want to sound unprepared. But instead of lying, I smiled honestly and said, "Not everything, but I'm learning. I'll catch up." He laughed kindly and replied, "Don't worry. Even native speakers don't understand everything in meetings. It's normal." Those words felt like someone lifted a heavy stone off my chest. For the next few weeks, faced challenge after challenge. I had to talk to co-workers, communicate in group chats, write emails in English, attend meetings where the topics were complex and the conversations moved fast. Every day felt like climbing a new mountain, but what surprised me the most was this. I didn't run from the mountains anymore. I climbed them. Every time I misunderstood something, I asked questions. Every time someone corrected me, I thanked them instead of feeling embarrassed. Every time I struggled, I reminded myself how far I had come. Slowly, English became less of a barrier and more of a muscle, one that grew stronger every time I used it. One afternoon, something unforgettable happened. I received my first task presentation. I had to explain a small project update to the team in English in front of everyone. The old version of me would have panicked, maybe even cried, maybe even quit the job to avoid the fear. But the new me prepared. I practiced every sentence. I rehearsed my introduction. I timed my pauses. I trained my voice to stay steady. I didn't aim for perfect grammar. I aimed for clear communication. When the time came and everyone looked at me, my legs shook, my hands were cold, but my voice was steady. I spoke slowly, clearly, confidently. I didn't rush, I didn't apologize, I didn't shrink. When I finished, the room was silent, not in judgment, but in genuine attention. Then my manager smiled and said, "Good job, that was very clear." Very clear, not perfect, not flawless, not native like, clear. It was the greatest compliment I had ever received in English. After the meeting, I went to the restroom, locked the door, and looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't recognize the person staring back. The fear in my eyes had faded. The heaviness in my shoulders had disappeared. The uncertainty in my voice had transformed into something new, something powerful. I whispered to myself, "You did it. You really did it." That night I walked home with a pride so deep it felt like warmth inside my chest. And I didn't care about mistakes. I didn't care about imperfections. I cared about the courage it took to stand in front of a room and speak a language I once feared. And then something even more incredible happened. A few days later, the HR team called me into the office. I panicked at first, thinking maybe I had made a mistake. But when I walked inside, the HR manager smiled and said, "We've been observing your effort and your communication. You're improving fast. We'd like to give you more responsibility." More responsibility. A promotion in less than a month. Not because I was perfect, but because I was improving. I stepped out of that office with tears in my eyes. I didn't cry because it was emotional. I cried because it was proof, living proof, that all the years I felt useless, all the days I felt hopeless, all the moments I wanted to give up, they weren't the end. They were the beginning. And for the first time, I realized something life-changing. Success is not the opposite of failure. Success is built on top of failure. Every mistake had become a step. Every rejection had become fuel. Every fear had become a lesson. I wasn't running from my old self anymore. I was rising above him. English wasn't my enemy. English was the door. And finally, I had walked through it. But my journey wasn't over, because the greatest transformation, the one that would change everything, was waiting just ahead. Segment 7. The transformation I never imagined. There comes a moment in every journey when you look back and realize you're no longer the person who began. For me, that moment came one evening when I stayed late at work, finishing a task that my manager trusted me with. The office was quiet. The city lights glowed outside the window, and I sat there typing confidently in English, reviewing documents I once would have been terrified to read. It hit me suddenly. I can do this now, effortlessly. I leaned back in my chair, letting the moment sink in. The journey played through my mind like a movie. The early failures, the painful rejections, the long nights, the self-doubt, the tears, the breakthroughs, the small victories that led to big changes. And now, here I was, working in English, communicating in English, living a life I once believed was impossible for someone like me. Success didn't come in one big moment. It came through hundreds of small choices, Hundreds of times I said, try again. Hundreds of moments I whispered, don't give up. The truth is, English didn't just change my career, it changed me. It rebuilt the way I think, the way I speak, the way I see myself in the world. But the biggest transformation wasn't in my vocabulary, it was in my confidence, my belief, my identity. One day, a new employee joined the company, nervous, quiet, unsure. During lunch, he looked at me and said, "Your English is really good. I hope one day I can speak like you." For a second, I couldn't respond. Me? Someone wanted to speak like me? The same person who once failed every interview? The same person who once couldn't say a full sentence? I smiled softly and told him the truth. I wasn't good. I just refused to quit. That's when I realized something powerful. Your journey becomes someone else's inspiration. Your struggle becomes someone else's guide. Your growth becomes someone else's hope. And that is the most beautiful part of success. Not what you achieve, but who you become, and how your story lights the path for someone else. My English journey is not perfect. I still learn. I still forget words. I still make mistakes. But now, mistakes don't stop me. They teach me. Every day I grow a little more. Every day I speak a little better. Every day I understand a little deeper. And every day I remind myself where it all started. With fear, with failure, with doubt, but also with a choice. A choice to rise, a choice to try, a choice to believe that my future could be bigger than my past. And here I am, proving that choice right. So if you're listening to this, let me tell you something from my heart. You are not too late. You are not too weak. You are not too broken. You are not too far behind. If I can rise from failure, you can rise from anything. Your English can grow. Your confidence can grow. Your life can change. You just need one thing: the willingness to start and the courage to continue. Your story isn't over. In fact, it's just beginning. If this story inspired you, if it gave you strength or hope, then don't leave without subscribing. Join this channel, join this journey, and let's grow together your English, your confidence, and your life. Hit the subscribe button right now. Your future self will thank you.